That house was never yours to keep, my mother said, and 31 people at my grandmother's repast looked down at their paper plates. Within 13 days of Lorraine Whitaker's funeral, my parents had forged my name on a deed, sold the little house she left me for $312,000, and told our family I had asked them to do it because I was too immature to handle money. By the end of May, a Tulsa police officer was asking me to step off the porch where I had changed my grandmother's sheets and rubbed lotion into her hands, because the buyers had been told I was trespassing. Then, on a Tuesday morning in August, a woman in a navy blazer walked into our church fellowship hall with a closing binder under her arm and asked if anyone wanted the numbers read out loud. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, on April 27th, 2024. My grandmother's house sat on a quiet block near Florence Park, with a cracked front walk, two rose bushes that never agreed with summer, and a kitchen window that went amber at 5:30 every evening. I had spent the last 11 months of her life in that house, working mornings as an assistant property manager at Redbud Lofts, and spending my nights there with her oxygen machine ticking like a metronome in the corner of the den. My mother, Karen Reed, called herself the daughter who handled things, which in our family meant she spoke first, decided first, and then called everybody else's silence agreement. My father, Thomas Reed, had a softer face and weaker spine, the kind of man who looked tired enough to be innocent until you checked where the money went. In my family, love was something you earned by agreeing fast. Grandma Lorraine knew exactly how my parents were, which is why in 2019 she signed a transfer on death deed, putting the house in my name the minute she passed. She told me this on a Wednesday afternoon while the house smelled like lemon oil and chicken broth, and Gloria Whitaker, her 71-year-old choir friend, sat at the table peeling apples with that tiny paring knife she kept in her purse. Gloria looked at me over her glasses and said, "Honey, your grandmother is trying to leave you one place where nobody can vote you out." I laughed when she said it, because it sounded dramatic at the time, but Grandma did not laugh. She just folded the deed back into the manila envelope and told me where she kept the key to the file cabinet. The funeral was on Monday, May 6th, at 11 in the morning, and the repast afterward was in the fellowship hall at New Hope Bible Church under those humming fluorescent lights that make ham glaze shine like plastic. There were 31 people there by my count, because I had spent the whole service trying not to cry by counting things I could control, like hymn numbers, rows of chairs, and the stack of white foam cups near the coffee urn. My mother waited until people were eating pound cake to say that line about the house not being mine to keep. Then she laid one hand flat on the table and added, "Your grandmother wanted the property kept in the family, Samantha, and we are the only ones equipped to do that." Gloria, who was sitting 2 chairs down from me in a lavender church suit, stopped with her fork halfway to her mouth and stared at my mother so hard the room seemed to tilt. I said nothing. That is how long it took them to turn grief into paperwork. 3 days after the funeral, my mother called and told me not to worry about the legal side because she and Dad were already handling the transition. I remember the exact weight of my phone in my palm because I was sitting in my car outside the Tulsa County Courthouse, engine off, with $46.14 in my checking account and a folder of caregiving receipts on the passenger seat. Something in her tone made me walk inside anyway, and at 2:17 that afternoon, a clerk with coral lipstick slid a printout across the counter showing a quitclaim deed recorded that morning at 9:14. It said I had transferred the house to Karen Reed for $10 and other valuable consideration. 4 days later, on a separate line in the same chain, Karen and Thomas Reed sold the house to Mark Keller for $312,000 cash. That is how long it took them to erase me. I knew the signature was not mine before I even sat down, because mine loops wide on the S, and the one on that page was tight and pinched, like somebody trying to write my name while thinking about their own. My first real thought was not even anger. It was a stupid, practical thing. My grandmother's blue quilt was still in the hall closet, and I wanted it before strangers touched it. When I drove there that evening, a white work van was already in the driveway, and a man I had never seen before was carrying rolled flooring through the front door. 10 minutes later, a Tulsa police officer with sunburn across the back of his neck asked me to step off the porch because the new owner had closing documents and my mother had apparently told everyone I was having a grief episode. I went back to my apartment and did not scream. I opened notes on my phone and typed the date, the time, the officer's name, the badge number, the exact wording he used, and the fact that he glanced at me with sympathy, but still told me to leave. Daniel Ruiz came over around 8 with takeout I never touched, and when I showed him the deed, he set a yellow legal pad on my table and wrote May 9th, 2024, across the top in block letters. Daniel was my boyfriend, though he never acted like he owned my pain, and the thing I remember most is that he did not say anything dramatic. He just uncapped a pen and said, "Do not answer fast. Answer true." Quiet competence is ugly to liars because it gives them nowhere to hide. The next morning, I filed a police report for forgery, then met with a civil attorney named Marissa Cole, whose office smelled like toner and peppermint tea. She did not waste my time with comfort. She asked for Grandma's deed, death certificate, the forged quitclaim deed, every text from my parents, and the name of every person who heard my mother say I had agreed to sell. By Friday, my mother had already called 2 aunts, one cousin, Pastor Neil, and Gloria, telling all of them I had begged for cash because I was drowning in debt. Gloria called me from her kitchen while her radio played old gospel in the background and said, "I am old, not blind. Your mother is rushing because paper has a smell when it starts to burn." That line stayed with me. Once I pushed back, my parents stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding and started treating it like a campaign. My mother sent 14 calls in 5 days, then switched to texts so she could sound calm in writing while saying vicious things like, "You are humiliating your father over something your grandmother would have wanted," and "Do you really want employers seeing your name in a fraud case?" 2 days later, someone emailed my regional manager at Redbud Lofts, claiming I had stolen cash from an elderly relative and was unstable around tenants' keys. The message came from a fake address, but the phrasing sounded exactly like my mother, polished and churchy and cruel. She was not protecting the family. She was protecting her position. I did what Marissa told me to do. I froze my credit anyway, saved every voicemail, exported my texts, and sent certified letters to my parents demanding preservation of all documents connected to the sale, including emails, bank records, and communications with the title company. We requested the full closing packet. We pulled Grandma's original transfer on death deed from the county file. We subpoenaed the notary journal for Tina Gresham, the notary whose stamp appeared under my forged signature, and we learned something almost laughably stupid. On the morning she supposedly watched me sign away a house, Tina Gresham had checked into St. Francis for outpatient gallbladder surgery at 7:42 a.m. Liars always think details belong only to them. The closing packet arrived in a thick envelope on June 3rd, and I spread every page across my kitchen floor while Daniel made coffee I forgot to drink. The settlement statement showed seller proceeds of $287,436.18. A wire confirmation listed $211,804.19 sent to an account at Red River Bank ending in 4412. That account belonged to my parents. Another cashier's check for $58,000 went to Reed Comfort Air, my father's struggling HVAC company, and the rest vanished into fees, taxes, and payoff lines. Have you ever had a folder full of dates, signatures, and account numbers, and still had people look you in the face and ask why you could not just forgive them? That was the moment I understood some people would rather watch you drown than admit they shoved you in. Community pressure got uglier after that. Pastor Neil invited me to what he called a peace conversation, which turned out to be a lecture about bitterness in a room that smelled like old carpet and copier heat. Aunt Michelle told me I was hurting my father when he was already under stress. My cousin Jenna said Grandma would hate seeing the family torn apart. I kept my voice level, took notes after every conversation, and did not show them the evidence that was now sitting in 3 labeled binders in my hall closet. In late June, my father called me at 11:38 at night, from a number I did not know, and said very softly, "Your mom said we would fix it before you found out." Then he inhaled like he was about to tell the truth and only managed. The IRS was going to take the trucks. He was not redeemed by that. He was just finally naked inside his own excuse. On July 9th, the Kellers' lender froze further renovation draws because Marissa had filed a quiet title action and a notice in the county records. That is how Donna Keller entered my life. She was Mark Keller's wife, 43 years old, a compliance manager at a bank, and before that she had spent 12 years in title work. She called me on a Thursday morning with a voice so clipped and professional that I thought she was going to accuse me of sabotaging her family. Instead, she said, "Ms. Reed, I do not know what your relatives told us, but I have 3 versions of the same story, and yours is the only one that matches the paper." I did not cry on that call. I stared at the steam rising from my oatmeal and wrote down every word. What Dana did not know was that my mother had spent those same weeks telling church people I was bullying an innocent couple out of greed. So when Pastor Neil scheduled another so-called peace meeting for Tuesday, August 13th, in the fellowship hall, he invited the Kellers too, thinking public pressure would make me back down. The room looked almost exactly like it had after the funeral. Same humming lights, same folding tables, same women from the kitchen ministry lining up tea pitchers along the wall. Gloria Whitaker came in wearing a navy skirt and white blouse, set her purse on the chair beside me, and squeezed my forearm once. She did not ask if I was ready. She said, "Sit straight and let foolish people talk themselves tired." My mother did exactly what Gloria predicted. She told the room I was dragging honest people through court over an arrangement I had already accepted, and she called me emotional, vindictive, and confused by grief. My father stared at the table. Pastor Neil asked whether there was any way to settle it privately. Then Donna Keller stood up from the far end of the room with a dark blue closing binder under one arm and asked, in the calmest voice I have ever heard, whether the room would prefer feelings or documents. Nobody answered. Gloria did. She leaned back in her chair and said, "Read the documents, honey, slow enough for the people in the back." Donna did not know she was delivering a verdict. She opened the binder to the first flagged page and read the quitclaim deed, then the title insurer's reservation letter, then the notary affidavit stating that Tina Gresham had not witnessed my signature and had not authorized use of her seal on May 6th. She read the wire confirmation showing the deposit into Red River bank account ending in 4412, then the cashier's check to Reed Comfort Air, then the certified mail receipt showing my mother signed for Marissa's preservation demand on May 18th and denied any sale 3 days later anyway. After that, Dana lifted one more page and said, almost apologetically, "For clarity, Ms. Samantha Reed is the only person in this file who has provided consistent records, dates, and documentation from the first call to today." Silence can be louder than any confession. I will never forget my mother's face in that moment, not because it twisted into some movie villain expression, but because it emptied. She had one hand braced on the table, fingers spread over a church bulletin, and when Dinah read the account number aloud, my mother's jaw locked and her eyes went flat like a door closing from the inside. My father looked at the wire page once and whispered, "Karen," like he had only just now discovered her name had weight. Gloria, who had seen the whole thing start with that line at the repast, reached for her tea, took a sip, and said into the silence, there it is. The house spoke. No one in that room could unhear the numbers. What happened after that was not dramatic in the way television teaches you to expect. My mother did not launch into a speech. Pastor Neil did not suddenly become wise. People just began shifting their loyalty in inches, which is how real social weather changes. Aunt Michelle stopped making eye contact with me and started staring at my father. One of the kitchen ministry women quietly moved the pitcher of sweet tea away from my mother's elbow, like even that small kindness no longer belonged to her. Community consequence does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives as chairs scraping back from your table. The legal part took another 7 months. The title insurer paid the Kellers for their loss and unwound the sale. My quiet title case ended with the house transferred properly into my name, under Grandma Lorraine's original deed, and the district attorney's office filed forgery and false instrument charges against my mother after Tina Gresham's affidavit and the bank records lined up. My father took a plea on a related fraud count tied to the proceeds because his company had accepted part of the money, and he was ordered to pay restitution. I did not celebrate any of that. Justice is often administrative when you finally get it, and paperwork does not hug you back. But when I got the new deed in the mail, I held it with both hands and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in months. By spring, word had spread through church circles and family calls without a single push from me. I did not post about it. I did not send group texts. I did not need to. People who had once told me to keep the peace began speaking to me like I had survived a flood they had watched from their porch. My regional manager apologized for ever entertaining the anonymous email, and 2 tenants at work brought me tomato plants when they heard I finally had the house back. Daniel came over on the first Saturday after the locks were changed, set his toolbox by the door, and replaced every deadbolt, while Gloria sat at the kitchen table eating store-bought pound cake and telling stories about my grandmother singing alto off-key on purpose just to annoy the choir director. Chosen family does not always arrive all at once. Sometimes it gathers one folding chair at a time. I need to be honest about the part people always rush. Forgiveness has not arrived in some clean, shining package, and I do not think that makes me broken. My mother sent one letter from her attorney, and then, months later, a birthday card with no apology in it, just my name written too carefully across the envelope. My father called once after sentencing and cried hard enough that I had to move the phone away from my ear, but even then he never said the simple sentence that mattered. I forged your name. I stole your house. Until those words exist in daylight, the door stays where it is. Peace is not the same thing as pretending. These days, I spend Sunday evenings in Grandma Lorraine's kitchen with the windows cracked open, Daniel seasoning chicken at the stove, Gloria arguing with the weather report from her usual chair, and my friend Leah from work bringing over whatever dessert she ruined slightly and swears is not worth serving. The rose bushes still fight the heat. The kitchen window still turns amber at 5:30. Sometimes I catch myself listening for the oxygen machine that is no longer there, and sometimes grief comes back so fast it feels like another person entering the room. But the house is mine. Not because paper says so, though paper finally does, but because I stayed. If you are the one holding the folder everyone keeps asking you to burn, keep it. Truth is slow, but it knows the way home.